pride really blocks us from healing, from evolving, from growing, that gets in the way of the endless possibilities that are present when we step into the opposite of pride, which is humility. Perhaps you avoid vulnerability because it doesn't feel safe to you and you don't trust being vulnerable. There's pride there, my friend. When you need validation, like if you're someone who needs validation constantly and you're seeking validation from external sources, you always want to hear how other people think you did, or did I do a good job, or validate me, or you're looking for someone to praise you, there's pride there. Welcome to the Daily Surrender, a space for real, raw, and vulnerable conversations about what it truly means to live in alignment with God's design. I'm Jennifer Ragazzo, a soul-aligned wellness coach who is far from perfect and still figuring out this whole human experience, just like you. Here we talk about the messy, the beautiful, and everything in between as we learn to let go, trust more, and step into the peace and freedom that's already waiting for us. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Daily Surrender. I'm your host, Jen Ragazzo, and today we're going to be talking about one of the biggest spiritual blocks that I've personally faced, that I've witnessed in other people over and over and over again, and maybe one that you have struggled with or you might even see in yourself after this episode, and that is pride. Pride from a mystical and more metaphysical perspective is not just arrogance or boasting. That's often how we think about pride. We think that someone who is prideful is just someone who is so full of themselves. But the pride that we're going to dive into in this episode here today is the pride that really blocks us from healing, from evolving, from growing, that gets in the way of the endless possibilities that are present when we step into the opposite of pride, which is humility. So pride, I'm a visual person, and I often see pride as being the deadbolt on the door of your soul. You can be, for instance, praying for healing. You can be longing for peace in your marriage, in your career. You can be searching for really fulfilling work in the world. You can really be desiring more authentic relationships. So you can have the desire there. You can have good intentions. But if the deadbolt of pride is locked, the light of the Creator just cannot get through. We are getting in the way of that. Humility, which we're going to dive in more detail here today. Humility really is the key that unlocks that door, and it swings it wide open for endless possibilities in your life. So before we continue, I want to really get more specific with what pride really is. Because again, we often think of pride as being just arrogance, right? We're arrogance or we're arrogant or we're boastful, cocky, right? That's another term that we might think of when we think of people who have a lot of pride. But pride in the deadly sense, pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. In the deadly sense, pride wears a lot of different sneaky disguises. From a spiritual lens, pride is the insistence on always being right. That was something that I struggled with a lot. I really struggled with ever being wrong. And that had so much more to do with my deep-seated fear that I was inherently wrong. So I was always defensive. And I wanted to win the fight and have the last word. Pride can come out as the need to cling to our stories, really sit in victimhood or this self created identity that this is me and these are my stories and I'm not changing them. This is who I am. And we fight for our right to keep perpetuating these stories that are actually keeping us so stuck in pain and suffering. Pride can show up as the refusal to see ourselves really honestly. And that's something that I look at as spiritual blindness. When we're not able to step into honesty, which requires humility. And if we're in a prideful stance, there is no way we're getting to honesty. Then we are spiritually blind. Pride also can show up in really subtle ways, ways where we might make people or circumstances our actual persecutors. So we're perpetuating our state of victimhood and we're always blaming people outside of us. They're the reason why I am so angry or why I have to do the things that I do in the world or why I'm so drained. We could be blaming a job. The job is why I'm so miserable. There's no way that I can step out of this because I have to show up for this job. And that job becomes our persecutor. And this blocks us from going inward and again, stepping into that stance of humility and honesty and taking radical responsibility for the ways that we're creating our existence. Pride also can show up as struggling to ask for help and in that receiving the help. That's something else that I've really struggled a lot with in my past that I can absolutely tell you kept me so blocked and miserable too. I want to give you some more specific examples of how all of this actually plays out in real life because I know that not only has this shown up in me and many relationships that I'm in my life, I see it in clients that I've worked with. It shows up here and there. Pride will rear its ugly head for all of us. So, really understanding why, seeing it, and being able to stand in the place of saying, okay, all right, I understand now that I am an active participant in keeping, again, that metaphorical door dead bolted shut to all the things I say I want, but I'm the one who is in the way of that door swinging wide open for the change and transformation. So the insistence on being right, that's a big one. That looks like perhaps needing to have the last word in an argument. If you're in an argument with your spouse, your partner, if you're the one who always has to have the last word, even when it's costing you intimacy, even when it's costing you a good, healthy relationship and you're perpetuating the pain of it, you've got pride in the way, my friends. And I'll tell you a little bit more about my own personal relationship with pride and how I started to recognize that it was one of my biggest blocks, like truly one of my biggest blocks to healing, to peace, to joy, to the marriage that I really desired, to the relationships in my life that I really desired. The insistence on being right can show up as resisting new perspectives, thinking, I already know it all. I know everything. I'm so attached to my own opinions, my own worldview, that I am unwilling to hear anybody else's. So I'm going to always make other people wrong, or I'm going to feel very triggered when they are introducing me to something new. That might just be a different perspective. If we're prideful, we are not open to learning new things. We are not listening and allowing the spirit within us to guide us to the new things, to new perspectives, to different ways of understanding. Spiritually, it's like saying, I already know, so don't show me anything new, God. I already am filled with all the knowledge and education that I'll ever need. That's a bunch of BS. That's not true. As long as we're here and we've got breath in our lungs, there's things for us to learn. There's ways for us to grow and evolve. But pride can block all of that. Pride can show up as clinging to victimhood or that identity. And it might look like someone who defines themselves perhaps entirely by a diagnosis. I have come across that a lot in my career as a health and wellness coach. Early on in my practice, before I really understood what readiness means, like for that person that's sitting before me to really be ready to do their own work, I was so excited to get clients. I would take absolutely anybody into my practice. And I came across a few people who were so stuck in victimhood. They were so married to their stories. Even though they would say, I'm in pain and I want to heal, but I'm unwilling to drop the victimy story of woe is me. I'm the person that's constantly suffering with chronic migraine headaches. I have chronic Lyme disease, whatever the thing is. And what happens is people begin to create their story as their actual identity, as if it's immovable. And they replay their stories over and over and over again. It doesn't have to just be health related. It could be the story of their divorce and how their partner was their persecutor and they created so much pain, and they're just living into the story over and over and over again until it becomes their actual identity. It feels so much safer to stay in the role of victim than to risk the unknown of freedom. That is pride in the way of unlocking, again, the soul's desire for freedom. So, spiritual blindness, just going deeper into the things that I introduced here today, spiritual blindness really can look like complaining, like perhaps we're complaining about our toxic boss, but we're refusing to see how our lack of boundaries plays a role with our toxic boss. It can be blaming our partner for all the problems in our marriage without looking at ourselves. We're super defensive. We're very, very defensive if our partner brings something to us because they're the ones that are creating the discord in the relationship. It's their fault. And that pride can be a massive block from healing, from growing together. When two people come together in a relationship, you really do have the opportunity to be sparring mates to one another's soul. But that takes humility. If you've got pride, you're not sparring mates that help sharpen one another's sword and grow one another. You're just trying to fight again to keep your story, to keep your stance, to keep the identity of being victim, and you will not grow. You won't. I have seen some of the best relationships, people, not the best relationships, the relationships with the best potential just crumble to the ground because of pride. And if the one or the other of the partners would have just dropped deeply into humility and said, you know what? I'm an imperfect being. I know that I have a role to play in this relationship, and I know I need to take a look at myself and step into that, the relationship could have flourished. It could have been an amazing relationship and partnership, but unfortunately, pride kept that from happening. Pride will say that the problem is always out there, while humility asks, where is this within me? Do you see the difference there? And you can feel it. When you're in a prideful stance, your whole body feels defensive, it feels tight. But when you step into humility, there's softness, there's ease, there's flow in a way that there just absolutely cannot be when you're in a prideful stance. I have a client that I'm working with right now who's doing amazing work. And she has been able to identify how she was in a prideful position, really, really sticking to her stories of victimhood. And some crappy things had happened to her in her life. And her relationship with her mom has never been a great one. Mom's a narcissist. But when she dropped her pride that kept her in a very angry stance, keeping mom as her persecutor and perpetuating her story that kept her in a state of victimhood, it was blocking her from becoming a creator of her own joy and happiness, from loving on her inner child, from taking a place where she was able to celebrate who she is and how far she's been able to come despite having a strained relationship with her mom. And once she was able to say, wow, you know what? I'm going to become a creator. I can't necessarily change the exact circumstances of this relationship, but I can start to humble myself and step into honesty and look at ways that I can change. Look at ways that I can change my perspective. I can change what I do with this relationship. And the amount of softness that came over her and healing. A lot of her physical symptoms have begun to lift because she's not in that fighting, tight, prideful stance of, again, perpetuating the stories of victimhood. Another way that this can show up, again, I mentioned this earlier, is making our people or circumstances into persecutors, which is a good follow up to the story about my client. So when we keep saying things like, my mother ruined my life, my ex is the reason why I'm so miserable because of what he did to me, or that company screwed me over. That pride in all of that, that puts all of our power into someone else's hands or something else, right? We talked in 2 episodes ago about non-duality and really living without giving power to anything outside of one, the creator, God, divine, that is within us. So if we're gonna start playing out this prideful stance of pointing out all our persecutors outside of us, we're giving them power. We're feeding that by perpetuating the story. But humility is going to cut the power off, and it takes responsibility for our soul's growth. And it says, oh, you have no power. You have no power. The power is within me. And with humility and honesty, I can step into a place of allowing even this circumstance to be for me and for my soul's growth and evolution. Do you see here how sneaky pride is? It's not just arrogance. It's not this loud arrogance. It certainly can be. But most often, pride will show up in these really subtle, everyday patterns that keep us locked in cycles of suffering. I want to share a little bit of my own story with pride and my hard road to humility. I had a lot of pride. And in being honest and transparent with you, because why not? I struggled with it most of my life. I was always the person who wanted to be right in the fight. So if I was in a disagreement or an argument with someone, who did I get triggered? Because I would end up very defensive. Humility did not come unnaturally to me. And a lot of this was tied to deeper constructs that I was unaware of that were in my subconscious mind, where I had an inherent belief that I was actually wrong. And yet the irony was I would fight to be right in any argument. Like it was too painful for me to drop into humility and hear that perhaps I had something to do with what happened or why somebody else was upset or hurt. And so I would become really, really defensive, like throw my dukes up. And man, that did not bide well in my marriage. It did not bide well in parenting, especially when the kids became teenagers. My son, I have one son, he's 20 now, but when he started into teenagehood, he is so much like me. And I modeled this for him. So he had a lot of pride. And I would definitely say that his pride was showing up as arrogance. And he and I would go at it. Like we would go at it. And we were both there fighting for our right to be right, wanting to have the last word, very defensive, very, very defensive. And it wasn't until I changed that he changed. And then our relationship changed for the better. I mean, we look back now and we can laugh at how bad some of our fights were. And like we were going at it. Like my daughters, my husband, they would scurry when the two of us would really get at it. But it was so much for me of that prideful stance that I was living in. I was so much, very, very much I'm going to do it myself. You know, like a toddler when they're learning to put their shoes on, or a preschooler maybe. And they're like, you're like, oh, we got to get out the door. Mommy can help you. No, no, no. I do it myself. I was like that as a grown adult. Like I was a grown adult and I'm like, no, 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 no. I don't need anybody's help. Yet here I am acting like a martyr all the time. I was burning myself to the ground. I was exhausted, but no, I had to do it. Nobody could do it better than me. I had to be in control. All of that was my pride. I prided myself on being the giver. I wanted to be the one to give to other people. That brought me joy. But if I'm being really honest, which today I'm humble and honest, I've learned how to do that. I was doing it to feed my own ego too, and to keep me in the stance of giving. So I was in control because receiving was really uncomfortable for me. So not receiving was also part of how pride played out in my life. And that would bother a lot of the people in my life who wanted to give to me. They're like, geez, Jen, like you're impossible to help or to give in any way to because you're constantly in the stance of like, no, 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 I'm going to do it myself. You don't need to do that. But oh, let me give to you. I hated being corrected in any way, shape, or form. I was a teacher, feels like a different lifetime, and in my 20s, throughout my 20s. And I remember my second year of teaching, I had started off like many teachers do, just so naive and thinking that this is all going to be sticker charts and rainbows and butterflies. And I had a great class my first year. So it was pretty easy. They loved me, and classroom management was pretty easy. Working with the parents was pretty easy. And then the second year, I had 5 really challenging children. And I had a bunch of very challenging parents. I had no idea what I was doing. I was drowning in really poor classroom management. My sticker charts weren't working. I had behavior problems in the classroom. I had parents upset with me because there was behavior problems in the classroom. And my principal, I'll never forget the day my principal had me in his office and he had to write me up. That was, oh my gosh, I thought I was going to die. I was so prideful. Deep down, I knew. I mean, how does any new teacher know how to manage a classroom of 25 kids? And if you've got kids that are really misbehaving, you have to learn. Anytime we start something new, we need to drop into humility because there is no such thing as perfection. And there's certainly no such thing as just knowing it all from the start. But I was not humble at that season of my life. I was so angry at him. I was so upset. I told everyone who would listen what a jerk he was. And I look back on that time and it did humble me, but it was a very painful, humbling lesson because I had to learn the hard way instead of receiving help from people who were wiser than me, people who had been doing this a lot longer, receiving the gift of being written up instead of looking at it like I'm a victim and he was my persecutor. And I didn't ask for help. I didn't receive help from people around me. I did find it on my own, which I could have made that whole path a lot easier too. So I ran the victim card in a lot of areas in my life for a long time. I replayed a lot of the same stories over and over and over again in my head. I'm sure you can think about times when you've done that too. Oh my gosh, it's so exhausting too when we just keep running the racket, running the story over and over and over again where someone else was our persecutor or something else and we're just the powerless one. You see again how even in those situations, we're giving power away to things that then it's draining our energy. It's leaking a massive amount of our life force out. So it wasn't until for me, it was about 5.5 years ago when everything in my life was just, oh, I was at the tipping point. I really was at the tipping point. Prideful me was doing all the things. I was momming, running a successful business. I had my main business. I had a business on the side. I was a contractor for another school. And my marriage was not in a great place. My husband and I, oh my goodness, my pride and his pride. We both were prideful people. We both were prideful people. But our pride kept us in a place of not even being able to communicate with one another. So we're like, fine, you're defensive. I'm not going to communicate my feelings to you, but I'm going to sit here really resentful. And then I'm going to be passive aggressive. So we had a lot of that BS going on between the two of us. And there was just so much. And I've talked about it on prior episodes, my journey to where I am today and my dark night of the soul. But God humbled me in big ways. When I looked at my physical health, my mental and emotional health, my spiritual health, my marriage, my parenting, again, I had an angry teenager and I did not know how to handle teenagers. You cannot handle teenagers well when you're really stuck in pride. And I found myself in a posture where I hired somebody to help me. And it was a big investment. If you've listened to other episodes, heard me talk about my mentor, Molly, that was when I met Molly. That's when she came into my life. And she was a force. She was bold and confident. And there was something about her confidence that unnerved me. It unnerved me. It actually triggered something in me. I'm like, oh, and I would make her wrong at first. I was making her the persecutor. I'm like, she just thinks she's right all the time. She's just trying to point out all these things that are wrong in me. Meanwhile, I've hired her to help me, right? And early on in my relationship with her, because I was butting heads with her, she used to send me pictures out of love. Truly, this sounds awful, but it really was out of love of a goat. And she's like, "You're being a stubborn goat right now." And I'm like, "Yeah, I am." And she's like, "I'm strong. I can arm wrestle. You want to wrestle?" And I'm like, "No, I actually don't want to wrestle. I'm investing time and financial resources in this and energy in this. What am I doing? Why am I doing this? I say I want to heal. I say I want my marriage to be better. I say I want to be a better parent, a better coach. I want to serve God better, but I'm in my own way." And that was the moment for me where I felt it was almost like a physical dropping of a big giant rock I was carrying, and that rock was pride. And that rock for me was like so blocking the door to any change, all the change that I said I wanted, by the way. And when I dropped it and I just started practicing humility, I would actually breathe. I'd have to breathe because my nervous system felt so like freaked out when I was stepping into humility versus pride. And I would feel my racing heart as, for instance, as Molly might be sharing something that she was seeing in me. She would be reflecting something to me and ask me some honest questions. And she was asking me to be honest. And I knew I couldn't be honest. I was okay with being vulnerable, but I was bypassing a lot of stuff. So once I was able to drop into humility and then therefore honesty, I mean, the work that her and I did in the 3.5 years we were together was nothing short of miraculous. I mean, we tore the house down in all areas of my being, body, mind, and spirit. My marriage, I was married at that time when I met Molly for 22 years. And we had met really young, been dating since we were 16 and 17, married at 23 and 24. And It wasn't great. I mean, to tear a marriage down to the ground, my husband and I will do a podcast shortly. We're going to do one soon, and tell a little bit of our story. But to tear a marriage down to the ground like we did and rebuild it to be what it is today takes a heck of a lot of humility. And Dante and I had to learn through some painful, painful lessons how to drop into humility. He had his own moment too, and I had to go first. And I look at it now, it doesn't mean that in every relationship, like for instance, the woman has to go first. It's one of you does. So stop being so prideful, pointing the finger, waiting for the other person to drop into humility. I did go first with it. And my humility allowed him over time, he had to do it his own way, but over time to drop deeply into humility. And I cannot emphasize enough how it changed everything. It changed our marriage. It changed our parenting. It changed our children. Our children were just modeling after us. Our children were very prideful. There was not a lot of humility going on in this household. There was a lot of arrogance, a lot of arguing. We don't have that anymore. And even if we do here and there, because again, we're humans, we really do know how to communicate to each other. And then the other one receiving someone else's feelings, if they're sharing their feelings, does know how to practice and drop into humility. So for me, a lot of it was practice. I would catch it and I'd be like, okay, I'm breathing. I could choose to be prideful right now. I feel my pride. Drop it. What if instead, Jen, you dropped into humility? What if? Let's see what will happen. And again, everything that I started to search for started to happen and unfolds. I found more peace. I found more joy. I was able to communicate better. We were making progress in our communication. As a coach, I was becoming a better and better coach. I stopped thinking that it was my job to fix everybody. I stopped working with people who were stuck in victimhood. And those who came to me stuck in victimhood, desiring to get out of it, I was able to confidently hold space and invite them into something that I had to do first. I can't sit here and invite other people to be what I am not myself. And that was something that I also realized in my journey into taking a hard look at the pride and the ways that it was blocking me from living this abundant life that I said that I wanted to. So, all of this for me was a huge, huge turning point on my journey. Massive turning point. I would not be here today having this conversation with you on the daily surrender. I would not be where I am today as a wife, as a daughter, as a sister. I mean, it's changed every relationship in my life. And as I slowly began dropping the pride and loosening my grip and embracing humility, I began to experience more and more freedom. That pride, you see, was killing me from the inside out. Like it was killing me. It was absolutely part of the inflammation that was showing up in all kinds of functional tests that I would run on myself. I didn't even realize how deadly it was until I started to let go of it. And then I really was able to understand more and more why it is listed as a deadly sin, right? It's one of the seven deadly sins. And pride had me so disconnected from spirit. I couldn't hear the Holy Spirit when I was in a position of pride. I was driving the ship. And once I was able to drop it, began to really experience again more abundant flow of all the things like peace and joy. Opportunities were coming to me. I could see the provision everywhere, a God's provision for me everywhere in my life, and I could start to receive. Dropping my pride also helped me to be able to receive and get out of that place where, no, 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 I can't receive. I have to only be the giver and I'm going to be in control all the time and just really receive too. And the beautiful, beautiful ripple effect again that I've experienced in dropping pride and stepping into humility has become that catalyst for everything, healing again in my marriage, in every relationship in my life. So, if you're hearing my story and it's something that you've struggled with, or you're identifying even in this conversation, some areas where you're still hanging on to pride, because we can have areas where we're really humble and then areas where we've got pride. Welcome to being human. But awareness is the first step to change. On the continuum of change, the first step is becoming aware that there's even something for us to change. So, if today's conversation is making you aware of that, congratulations. You have stepped onto the continuum of change, and it's a big one. It's a big one. So, let's talk about really briefly why pride is so spiritually deadly. I think from my story, you might have seen some of the reasons why it's so deadly. But pride will separate us. It's creating a separation. Not that we can ever be separated from God. We cannot be separated from God. But in our minds, we can create a disconnect, right? There can be something that we're putting in a position of power above God, and that can be ourselves, right? We're going to stick to our stories. It can separate us big times from other people. Again, pride was one of the biggest separations between me and my husband. It was like a wall. It was this wall between the two of us, and it just got thicker and thicker and thicker as the two of us stood in our prideful position. And it really can disconnect us from ourselves and from spirit, because you're just not able to hear when you're in a prideful place. Pride insists on control. I am a recovering control freak, and I can tell you that it was pride that was keeping me in a place of thinking that I could control all the things, which was me just feeding my ego. My egoic mind was driving the ship, saying, I know best. I can handle this. I'll do it myself. Humility says, I'm willing to be shown. I don't have all of the answers. I'm open to learning new things. I'm open to seeing things differently. I'm open to hearing your side. It's so much more freeing, my friends. It really is. Pride keeps the deadbolt locked, and humility opens the door to miracles. It swings it wide open, wide, wide open. I want to give two examples found in scripture here and dive into them a little bit more metaphysically, because they do a really good job pointing out to us why pride is so deadly. So in Luke 18, verses 9 to 14, I'm not going to read them all here. You can go look them up yourself if you're more interested. It's the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. There's so much goodness found in parables. And the Pharisee here is praying, and he prays, boasting of his righteousness. He's boasting. And the tax collector comes beating his chest, and he said, God, have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. And Jesus says, the humble man, not the prideful one, goes home justified. So what does that mean? Metaphysically, the Pharisee here is representing our ego identity. Our ego identity that clings to external performance, praying and boasting, right? Of how good we are and just being so right. And then the tax collector is representing humility. So the opposite stance, the prideful boasting, right? Look at me, I'm doing all the good things. And then the humble stance of like, please have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. Like I'm humbly coming and saying, I messed up. I'm being really honest. That's radical honesty right there about our need for God. And mystically, justification is not about earning points at all, but instead it's about coming back into alignment with truth. The ego cannot be justified. Only the surrendered self can be justified. Let's take a look at James 4. In James 4, it says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So, from a metaphysical lens, grace is not something God doles out sparingly, but it's a state that only we can access when we're soft, when we're open, when we're receptive. You see how it's not that, again, God is sparingly, like, here you get grace. I've got limited amounts of grace. Grace is endless, but it is a state that we have to step into. And we're stepping into it with a very receptive stance. So pride is going to close us off from grace because it's saying, I don't need help. I'll do it myself. Or, nope, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't have a part in this argument. It's all you. Humility comes in, and humility is opening the channel so that grace can really flow. So you can see how pride is a block. It's like blocking grace, which is wild because grace is endless. Again, it's not something that there's limitations to, but we have to participate in the receiving of it by being in a really humble stance. So, how can you recognize pride in your own life? I'm going to give you a few signs here that pride might be running the show for you. Again, it might be running the show in some areas of your life and not other areas, but maybe you feel really stuck in the same cycles and you're constantly finding yourself blaming other people or circumstances. It's like you're getting sick of your own stories because you keep hearing them over and over and over again. You're telling them to everybody who will listen. You're telling them to yourself. You're thinking of them in the car on the way home from work. You get really defensive very quickly when you're corrected. Like if you are a defensive person, there's pride there, my friend. Use your defensiveness as a divine tap on your shoulder to say, hey, psst, there's some pride here and it's hurting you. And I'm inviting you to step into humility. Perhaps you avoid vulnerability because it doesn't feel safe to you and you don't trust being vulnerable. There's pride there, my friend. When we struggle to ever be vulnerable, pride is in the way. When you need validation, like if you're someone who needs validation constantly and you're seeking validation from external sources, you always want to hear how other people think you did, or did I do a good job, or validate me, or you're looking for someone to praise you, there's pride there. Resisting asking for help. That was, as I've shared, something that was definitely a very prideful stance that I was taking. I can do it myself. I was so proud. But really, that was me being really, really freaking stubborn. And that kept me from receiving. So, if any of these things are resonating with you, I want you to know you are not alone. You're just not. The invitation is not to shame yourself. Like, please, none of this is about shame and blame, pointing out the things that you're doing wrong. But instead, if you're recognizing it, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place to be because again, that's the first step to change on the continuum of change. So if we see it and we're like, "Oh, okay, I think pride might be in the way here for me or it's something that I'd like to start working on and I'm pretty sure it's closing me off to God's light." Oh, awesome. What are you going to do about it? Like you now get to stand in a position of being a creator. You're stepping out of victimhood and you can create something new and you can choose humility instead. So how do we step into humility? We can pause before reacting. That purposeful pause, I've talked about that here on the podcast before, and I teach this to most of my clients. That purposeful pause before reacting is a godsend. When you feel the defensiveness rising up inside of you, and I bet money you can feel it physiologically, just take a breath, create some space for yourself. Maybe you even ask if you're in a conversation that's turning into an argument, to step away. I need a little bit of time right now to compose myself and to compose my thoughts. Do a check in. Can you drop that defensiveness? Practice gratitude. Gratitude softens pride because it shifts your perspective. It changes everything. Instead of standing in that victim-y stance, looking at all the things that are wrong, not right, the bad things that are happening to you, can you come into gratitude and look for what's good and right? Even if the good and right is the challenge that's before you to grow in humility. I started to really do that when I was practicing being more humble and dropping my pride. Thank you so much for this opportunity right now, God, to help me to practice not being defensive and to receiving constructive criticism with humility and the opportunity for me to be honest about where I can grow, how I can change, how I can show up differently. Ask God for a vision. Pray. Ask God to show you where you're blind. That's a wonderful way to practice humility. Go right to the creator, go right to source and say, show me what I can't see right now. Please, I feel the pride inside of me and I'm not sure where it's coming from. Can you help me? Can you show me? If you ask, you will be shown. So keep those eyes and ears wide open. Choose vulnerability. It is a choice. It is a choice. It takes some trust, but choose it. Start with someone who is safe. See your imperfections. Little by little, let them see you're messy. I used to be so prideful that I didn't want people to come over my house unless it was perfect. When I was a younger mom, I did a lot of like hosting even of play groups or moms groups or, mom's night out, things like that. And oh my gosh, I'd bust my ass to make sure the house was so perfect and so clean. Why? So that I gave off the illusion that I was running a perfect ship around here and that I didn't have 3 kids that were busy and they made messes. And I mean, it was ridiculous. It was pride. And I'm sure it did not make people feel better. People actually embrace our messy. They embrace our imperfections when we're vulnerable and we're honest and we're humble. We're like, hey, it was a really crazy busy day. I've got laundry piled up over there. And someone's like, oh, so do I. Thank you for leaving your mess. Thank you for letting me see the mess and see the imperfections instead of the illusion. Practice daily surrender. And the surrendering is not the surrendering to, we're not like surrendering to God. God is immovable. God is inside of us. It's the surrender of the things that are in the way, right? We have to let them go. So can we let go of our pride? Can we let go of our story? Can we let go of needing to be right or having the last word in the conversation? Imagine unlocking the deadbolt every single morning. If you're being inspired by this podcast to step into being more humble and more honest, imagine as you wake up in the morning, I'm going to unlock the deadbolt of pride and I'm going to open the door to humility, which will open the door to the divine's endless possibilities. Endless possibilities. I am someone who stands in awe at the miracles that have unfolded in my life since I dropped pride. So again, pride, wrapping this all up, pride is that deadbolt that keeps the soul locked down. But humility, if you choose to practice it, is the courage to say, I don't know. I don't have it all together. I'm an imperfect being, but I'm willing to see differently. I am. And that right there is the key that unlocks the endless possibilities of God's love. And out of that, the provision, abundance, freedom, fullness of life, everything your soul desires is on the other side of dropping pride and stepping into humility. So this week, I invite you to notice. Just start taking inventory of where pride is closing you off, where pride might be holding you back, and what might shift if instead of clinging to your pride, you choose humility. What could shift? Start to explore it. Get really curious. Notice what you're noticing because humility is not weakness. It's not at all. It's actually radical honesty. It's freedom. Again, it's all the things that your soul is desiring. It is the doorway to God's light flowing through every part of your life. And that is available for you. It is available for you. So, in wrapping up this episode, again, I thank you for being part of this conversation. It's takes a lot of humility even to listen to a conversation around pride. I would really appreciate if this has blessed you in any way, shape, or form. If you would leave a comment or review that helps more people to get this message, share it with someone who you know it may bless. And if you're looking for a guide by your side, someone to challenge you to see the things that you might be spiritually blind to, if you're looking to step into radical health and wellness and really align your soul with God's design for your life, I have a few spots open up this fall for one-on-one coaching and freedom journeys, as well as other smaller programs I have. You can use the link below to explore that, to book a discovery call with me, and we can hop on and talk about where you are and where your soul is longing to go. Thank you again, my friends. Until next week, continue to practice the daily surrender. Thank you for joining me on the Daily Surrender. If today's episode spoke to you, I'd love to hear your reflections. Send me a message, share this with a friend, or leave a review. Remember, true healing and freedom come when we let go, surrender, and trust that God's way is so much better than our way. Until next time, my friends, keep surrendering, keep rising, and keep walking in peace.